Welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the Leo snow full moon. This occurs on the 12th of February for most of us across the world, but on the 13th in Sydney, Australia. This occurs at 24 degrees and 6 minutes in Leo, so in the third decan, which is sub-ruled by Mars, the planet of assertion. Now, the moon is also very close to a beautiful fixed star. I'm going to share about that. That does bring some elevation in terms of the chemistry and charisma that this particular full moon has. But of course, the sign of Leo is very self-possessed. It is about I, the sign of Aquarius where the Sun, but also Mercury are, and very close together, is very much more about we, the collective. But intersecting the pair of them is the very erratic energies of Uranus. And that's going to make this particular full moon quite complex over the next 2 weeks of influence. I'm going to share with you what I feel the theme is of this particular position on this full moon and about that fixed star, a little bit more detail on how full moons work, but I'm also going to share with you the event chart from a natal perspective. That puts the ascendant in the sign of Cancer, but it means that the moon is in the second solar house, very much about our values, self-worth, but everyday money, and the Sun in the 8th house, very much to do with longer term finances, shared resources, but also where we're most invested emotionally. But Mercury is in a different house. It's in house 9, very much about information. Now, the sign of Aquarius is the 11th zodiac sign, but ironically on this event, from a natal viewpoint, it's Uranus that's occupying the 11th house. So I'll unpack all of that for you. I'll also share the solar event chart so we can all get a collective feel of how this will be for us all. And then I'll go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what your next fortnight is going to be like. If you're new to my channel, it's lovely to have your company. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions and comments are truly appreciated. If you've yet to sub to the channel, please help it thrive and do so now by clicking that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. Now, if you'd like to subscribe to get your daily free horoscope fired to your device, it has not been working properly the last week or so. I apologise for that. That's now fixed. Please see the link below for more. Also, if you'd like to work with me directly, I am a consultant astrologer. Please check out my one-to-one testimonials below. Or if you'd like to take advantage of my new astrology video readings, please see the link below for those. You can ask 2 questions. If you've got your birthday upcoming, have your solar return, or I can look at your year ahead. But my horoscope reports are half price to celebrate my new website through to the end of February. Please check out the new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It would be great if you joined us there. The Leo snow moon occurs on the 12th of February 2025 at 24 degrees and 6 minutes and at 1:53 p.m. universal based on Greenwich and the prime meridian. I'm going to share with you the exact timings of all the major cities on the screen now. You can see it's all on the 12th, apart from Sydney, as I mentioned before, which is just in the early hours of the 13th. Now, this event occurs in the third decan of the sign of Leo, which is interesting because that's sub-ruled by the feisty Mars. The moon, of course, is very much to do with nurture, and Mars can be about impatience. So that's interesting, just puts a little bit of a different dimension on things. But the fixed star that's so close to this event is Subra, and that adds luster to the natural qualities of the moon in Leo, which does have a rather dignified, perhaps even a regal air, and the charisma therefore is amplified by Subra's help. Now, because this is a fixed full moon, because we have the position of the moon and the sun, but also Uranus, all in fixed signs, if you have any planets between 21 degrees and 27 degrees across the signs of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio or Aquarius, all the fixed signs, you could feel this energy more keenly. But it's important to remember with fixed signs can be resistant and a little bit stubborn, and because Uranus is in the mix, it's going to be important that we do prepare ourselves to flex a little bit. If we're too rigid and resistant, that will just create more tension. So that's an important thing for all of us to bear in mind. But Leo as a full moon, I feel, makes us very much in touch with the more possessed side of our nature. It's more about ourselves, our individual self-expression. But it can be a very warm position for the moon to be, sociable, playful, affectionate, generous, and a real love of children very often. Now, the sun in Aquarius is in its detriment, but that's very much about us, we, the collective. It's about how we all interact and network. It can be about our higher values, but it is much cooler and more detached. So we've got two very opposing energies competing with one another, because that's what a full moon is. It is a degree of competition, because the moon's very much about being receptive, our emotional world, protectiveness, nurture, security, whereas the sun is very much about where we want to achieve things in a much more action-orientated way. Now, because Mercury is also very close to the sun, as I will show you shortly, that also brings another dimension to the mix. But I just want to express the fact that the sun and the moon are usually known as the luminaries as opposed to being planets. And if we think about it, the sun lights up the day and a full moon lights up the night, and in a very powerful way. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart. And intriguingly, the ascendant is in Cancer, the sign that's ruled by the moon. But you can see Mars, the planet of passion, and the ruler of that third decan of Leo, is just tucked up behind the ascendant in the 12th house. That can be quite a combustible place for Mars to be in any chart, but particularly in the sign of Cancer, where he is in retrograde, but also in his fall. Now, just in terms of providing a little bit of stability, Saturn, the planet of structure, actually forges a terrific angle to both the ascendant and of Mars. So that could stabilize Mars a little bit. Saturn's saying, let's work hard at the knowledge on this event. But you can see that the moon is in house 2. The second house, very much to do with life's foundations, can be to do with everyday money, our self-worth, our values, maybe to do with our everyday possessions. On the other side of the heavens, the sun's in the part of the overall chart based on Placidus, the 8th house. That's very much where we're most invested, where we can be devoted. It can be about shared resources, but it also can be about long-term finances too. But Mercury, intriguingly, is in house 9, very much about knowledge. And I think it's important to bear that mercurial energy in mind, because there's Uranus in house 11. The 11th house, very redolent of the sign of Aquarius, is about our future, but it is all how we are connected. Now, Uranus, of course, is in its fall in the sign of Taurus and has been causing a lot of mischief since it began its journey in that sign in the middle of May 2018 for just under 5 months. But that T-square between the sun and the moon, you can see, is extremely close. So that suggests there is going to be a lot of tension that we're all going to be feeling. Now, I know that tension is something that's quite common with lunations, but I think this one is going to be absolutely palpable. So how will this play out? Well, I feel for us all collectively, what we're going to see is some instability around the financial markets. Now, whether it is around cryptocurrencies, around traditional stocks, whether it is around the cost of borrowing, we've seen a drop in interest rates in the UK. But why is that? Because growth is so painfully low, and that's a real problem, because you can end up with something called stagnation, where we're not getting growth, and that can affect the markets in the longer term in a really bad way. We've also got a lot of direct presidential attention being directed to governmental departments that represent the collective. So in other words, people's information, the systems of government are being accessed. Are we absolutely sure about what the reason for that accessing is about? And I feel that what Uranus is going to do, and it will do it increasingly over this next year, is actually demonstrate, obviously once it goes into the sign of Gemini on the 7th of July to the 7th of October, we may see some change, particularly as it's linking so well to Neptune, Saturn and Pluto at that time. But I feel that as Uranus pushes on, and particularly as it goes over the fixed star of Algol, we are going to see an awful lot of restless stuff. And I feel, because Uranus can be about rebelliousness and it can be about pushing back, if people feel that their financial security is being threatened, particularly by ideology, which can be driven in a way by Uranus, I feel that there is going to be some pushback. So I feel we're going into a period that can be very unsettled indeed. But what about in our personal situations? Well, I'm going to share with you now the solar event chart, because I feel that that illustrates things in a very clear way about how this will impact on us all. So, understandably, the Sun and Mercury are in house 11, the Moon in the 5th house. So a 5th house moon is very warm, it is very ebullient, but we do have Uranus in house 2, and the 5th house can be very much about speculation but also risk, but it can also be where we just want to have a flutter. So for some people, I feel that this full moon could push forwards a desire to be a little bit more off the cuff. And if there is an item that they've really yearned for, we could see some people just deciding to go for it in that moment. But the issue is that it could cause some tension if there is a relationship involved. So in other words, if someone decides to act on their own part to make an executive decision without being inclusive, very Aquarius, in other words, they get caught up in what they want in terms of ego, the Leonian energy, that can create some problems. But what about Mars? Mars in the 4th house there, forging that really great link with Saturn in Pisces in the 12th. Well, Saturn is going to continue to be very, very influential in Pisces, and it will be beyond the time it spends in Aries from the 26th of May to the end of August, because it won't be until early 2026 that Saturn starts its whole new 29.5-year cycle, but that's coinciding with a big shift in Neptune's 164-year cycle. And of course, Uranus itself has just completed, by the time it moves into Gemini in April 2026, its own full 84-year cycle. So we've got some big stuff going on at the moment for sure, not least that we've had Jupiter and Saturn in a massive stress arrangement pretty well since last July through till now. However, the good news on this event is that Jupiter and Saturn have stretched out a bit. Jupiter is heading forwards now, but Saturn's just ahead for the moment. It won't stay ahead, and of course once we have Jupiter moving into Cancer, by the 15th of June, we are going to get a repetition of the square, which was exact on Christmas Eve and the 19th of August last year, just in a different sign. So, just to summarise, if we think about the 11th house as being how we all are part of something that's a whole, it is also about society, if you like. It could be argued to be about where we collaborate, cooperate, but it also should be about where we celebrate the things that we have in common. There's so much polarised thinking these days about almost any topic whatsoever, whether you follow a football team and the conversations about the owner or the manager or key players. People have very trenchant opinions, and that polarization is in itself causing a lot of tension. So the fact that we have this fixed T-square in a way where Uranus is the agent provocateur, if we don't just flex a little bit, particularly if we encounter someone who does see things differently, it could create an awful lot of tension. The only thing I would say is that Venus, the planet that rules money as well as relationships, is actually in a very fine link with Pluto that is now in its third visit in our lifetimes to the sign of Aquarius, and it's going to be there, of course, through to 243 initially, so a long time. But they're actually in a very positive link. Now, Venus might be in its detriment in the sign of Aries, but it is very much about knowing what we want and going for it, and that link to Pluto is about transformation. So our connections to one another are being transformed, whether we like it or not. Very Plutonian. We can either embrace Pluto or resist it. If we resist it, it causes even more issues. So our relationship to money, but each other, is shifting. But if we can, through this event, be much more understanding that if we can keep the dialogue moving, Mercury in the sign of Aquarius, understand if people have different values to us, but also if there is someone who's being a little bit precious, which is that Leo energy, maybe it's about using as diplomatic language as possible to nudge them to how we might see it. But I think at some level we could encounter something or someone over the next 2 weeks which is determined to be very rigid or very determined to assert what they want or believe onto us, whether it's at work, in a relationship, within the family, or internationally, or perhaps politically. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. If you've yet to watch your February deep dive forecast for each of the 12 signs, please see the link below for more. So Aries, the position of the Sun and Mercury, and of course of Pluto, is very much about your future, but it's also about the people you are drawn to. And it's possible that on this event, if there are some people around you in your network, that you suddenly, the electric energies of Uranus, realise, perhaps through something that gets said or done, that you want to actually distance yourself because Uranus can be about space. That may be a possibility. But the moon's in the part of your chart to do with romance, and it could be that if a relationship that perhaps you've been developing recently has been going quite well, it's going to be tested over the next couple of weeks if you are to discover whether you want to be with that person for the longer term. So there's different scenarios with this. I do feel that because Uranus is in your second house, that your income has possibly been somewhat fluctuating in recent years. And that in itself may have been quite challenging to deal with. So one of the things that perhaps the position of the full moon is asking you to do is not let your pride get in the way of trying some different approaches, or perhaps even reaching out to someone who may be able to give you some extra and additional insights. Now that could be a business consultant, it could be a life coach, it could be a counsellor, it could be a bank manager, it may be someone in your network that has that wisdom. Don't let the moon in Leo stop you from speaking out and articulating what you need. One of the things that's interesting with Uranus is that it can make things happen very, very quickly. And if there is something that you've been yearning to develop, perhaps it's a new interest, perhaps you've been wanting to get together with people collectively, perhaps you're inspired. Sometimes the 11th house can be actually very lucky, but it can also be about sports teams. That could be an area where you unify with others. But Uranus does create a lot of potential for tension. So for example, if your social world, the energy in Aquarius, is not aligned very well with your own personal needs, and you feel that you're giving away a little bit too much of yourself to other people, that may be where the full moon's asking you to redress the balance, to get a bit more in touch with what you need, and therefore keep a bit more detachment and space from certain friends. Or is there someone that's in your world who's actually very demanding and needs your attention a lot of the time? This may be a full moon where you have to lay down some extra and clearer boundaries. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Taurus, the combination of the Sun, Mercury and Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, is asking you to think very carefully at the moment about your connection to the wider world. It can also be where you can showcase your innate talent, receive extra recognition and acclaim. It can be about success. Most of us have slightly different goals and ambitions. A lot of people may be focused on their work and professional attainment. Other people can be more to do with family life, where they live, how they live there. For others, it could be about interest, voluntary work, perhaps looking after the grandkids if we're older. So everyone's way of connecting to the world can be slightly different, but whatever your big goals are at the moment, what the moon in Leo is saying to you is be mindful of how things feel. Because a classic scenario could be if you're offered a job over the next couple of weeks that really does seem to have the status and the kudos that really would be befitting of your talent, that may be very flattering, but also very tempting. And it could be that you get offered exactly the right thing for you. But what the moon's saying to you is make sure that you're going to feel comfortable in that environment. What Uranus is saying to you is the hard-won knowledge of the last 5 or 6 years of how you're going to be very in touch with the most authentic version of yourself. You're not going to give that up in order to perhaps conform to someone else's preconceived expectation of you. So it's possible, since Uranus has been in your sign, that you have discovered that you won't necessarily always want to go for the biggest and best. You want to go for the thing that gives you a sense of purpose and meaningfulness. And this particular moon is just saying stick with that policy, because yes, you could gain some extra recognition at this time, which can be hugely flattering, and it may be completely deserved. But if it does mean, for example, going for a job that's somewhere completely different with a lot of traveling, and that strains out your family relationships, or your own support structures will be in some ways constrained by the extra traveling or the demands of that role, it is something to be mindful of. So we all have to juggle, in a way, the polarity of a full moon to understand what the downside is along with the wonderful opportunity. So I think someone somewhere is very conscious of what you have to offer at the moment, which is lovely. But I think Uranus has really been asking you persistently and repeatedly not to get involved in situations which pulverize your passion. It's important to feel fully invested, and therefore just doing a job that may be well paid, that maybe has some kind of grand title, might not do it, at least for some Taurans, over the next 2 weeks. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Gemini, if you're considering something at this time, which is very, very important to you, whether it's a travel plan, whether it's some higher education, whether it's relocating, whether it's a contractual matter, whether there's an idea or concept you have that you want to reach a wider audience with, this full moon in some ways would seem to serve up the platform for you to sparkle. But there is some potential gotchas, not least that the third house position of the moon can at times, particularly in Leo, see us perhaps responding very rapidly in a way to mask how we really feel, because the sign of Leo doesn't like to feel vulnerable. It likes to seem very much on top. So that's one issue. But then the second issue is the electric energies of Uranus could bring about some communications or conversations over the next couple of weeks, which are so fast that maybe your subconscious is going to be activated in some ways, which could see you say something that surprises even you. Or it could see someone say something to you, about the way you approach things, that may seem a little bit of a low shot, because the 12th house can be secrets, can be, with Uranus in the mix, sudden revelations. But if you're someone who's really worked with Uranus over the last few years and integrated your emotions in a much more cohesive way, I feel that you'll deal with this full moon much better. But if you have been finding it difficult at times to understand why you've had added nervous energy, a surplus, and at times have felt a little bit on edge, or it's been more difficult to sleep, and you're still trying to figure out why that may be, this particular next fortnight could see some very interesting conversations, but ones which could get under your celestial skin a little bit. So just be aware of the tendency to say something quickly in order to protect yourself that actually might then set up a scenario which just becomes an arm wrestle. If you can avoid doing that, stay in touch with how you feel, the moon, and not speak too quickly on anything that's really important. That will help to slow things down and give you the inner space to think before you answer any points or observations anyone else makes. But you may encounter someone who does see things absolutely diametrically different to you. But if you are feeling limited in any part of your world at the moment, penned in, not many options, that could make you feel quite frustrated and a bit fretful, to be honest. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Cancer, how are you finding having Mars retrograde in your sign? Ever since the start of September, and when Mars moved into Cancer, you may have found yourself being somewhat more assertive. So on this particular event, because the moon's in your second house and the Sun, Mercury are in 8, Uranus in 11, Uranus is very much about your future, but it can also be about where you feel your rights are being respected or otherwise. So whether it's in terms of shared finances within the home, or whether it's at work, or whether it's with friends, on this particular full moon this year, you could find yourself surprisingly much more conscious of those strands in your situation. One of the reasons could be, to be honest, is because everything has gone up so much for so many people. So we've all had to become much more mindful of expenditure to try to make sure that those core bills and demands are met. But the great thing about Uranus, and also having Mars in your sign and in that great link to Saturn, is that you do have a choice, particularly with this full moon, to think outside the box. So if something isn't working, you don't see your long-term financial situation developing in a particularly bright and inspiring way, what Uranus is saying to you is don't be fearful of change, because your natural desire to have stability, particularly emotional and family stability, is laudable. But sometimes we do have to take a step outside that comfort zone in order to seize the opportunities at hand. And I feel that what Uranus is saying to you in some ways is that maybe even if you do run on the cautious and tad conservative side, it is very important to keep reviewing your situation, finding fresh information, reviewing your choices, seeing if taking a fresh look could actually render an exciting result. But just trudging along in the same way could at the moment be making you feel quite fretful about your future if you don't have a great sense of control. And that's where Mars could be good for you, because it can push you to be more assertive, particularly through to the middle of April. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. Leo, if there's a relationship you're not feeling very happy with at the present time, this is a really important event. The position of Mercury so close to the Sun can be a true asset, because Mercury in the 7th house, especially on the cusp as it is here, would make you have the capacity to be a bit more detached. And if someone has a different viewpoint to you, be very okay with that, because why not? We don't all have to agree. But it's really the role of Uranus. If you have really been trying hard to understand how someone feels, for example, or leaning into their situation and being as diplomatic as you can to try to meet what they need, but you don't feel that you're getting much back, what Uranus can do is make you much more outspoken. Because the 10th house position of Uranus sees Uranus right at the top of your chart. And even if you're someone who really doesn't like to rock the boat, doesn't want people to know when things aren't great, because you have a natural desire perhaps to keep issues private, I feel Uranus in some ways is challenging you and saying, look, if there's something you're not happy about, it might be necessary to speak to someone who does know the situation and get a completely fresh and different perspective. But Uranus can also be about checking out and freedom. The 10th house can also be about work. So these issues may be nothing to do with a family, personal, friendship relationship. They may be to do with who you have to align with in your professional world. And there, if you're really, or have been really trying to understand how other people feel and be as diplomatically inclined as possible, and it has really not seemed to work, Uranus in a way is saying to you, look, maybe a complete change of scene is what you need, because you need to be in an environment where you feel seen, heard, recognised, and most of all, respected. Most Leos do love to be liked, well, most of us do, certainly admired, but that respect is absolutely the minimum requirement. So in any relationship at the moment, if you're not feeling that level of respect, Uranus is saying it's time to be a bit more radical to make the other side see that it's not acceptable at all. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Virgo, this full moon emphasizes the part of your situation that many of us are a little bit reluctant to engage with. So that's the shadow side of our nature. the part that we can't quite fully see or integrate, or where we might be a little bit more reluctant to own that we could have some vulnerabilities, some insecurities, some sensitivities, and that's where the full moon is for you. On the other side of the heavens is your ruler Mercury in the 6th house, can be very sharp, precise, pointed, and it's alongside the Sun and Pluto. And as I've said to you several times, Pluto is going to push you over and over to evolve in terms of your work or life patterns, routines, the things that you've held dear. And if there is something that you're feeling a bit below par around, maybe you're finding your work, for example, rather demanding physically, and that's having an effect on your emotion, this full moon can amplify those feelings. But the 12th house full moon, to be honest, could be some energy that you can't see that may not be coming from you. It could be coming from someone else, because the 6th, 12th house angles can see opposition that's not openly manifested. But it may be that someone is being quite critical of you, your performance at the present time, but they won't necessarily tell you to your face, which is much trickier to deal with. And because Uranus in recent years has actually been asking you to be more experimental and not so caught up in a metronomic way in terms of leading your life, if you've really embraced that, maybe you have gone through some big changes around the work you do or the life structures you have. So this is a very, very important full moon in terms of being open to vulnerability. Don't judge it if you feel that you've got some frailties. It's part of the human condition. If you draw them to you, put your arm around those things, that will actually be very healing and very reassuring. But if you do work in an environment particularly which tends to be a bit bitchy, backbiting, office politics, all that kind of stuff, I do feel that you need to be particularly watchful over the next couple of weeks. The great news, however, is that Mercury does move into a much more constructive position for you personally from the 14th, followed by the Sun. And even if there are some jagged edges around certain interactions and some revelations come to the fore, you are going to have a great opportunity to get things on a much better footing in the latter part of February. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. Libra, you could find yourself very much in demand over the next couple of weeks, which is of course hugely flattering. It could be around your love life, it may be around your social situation, your connections to others. If you have got certain key friends and you enjoy being with them, it's possible that someone could become a much bigger player in your world, but not if you start to feel beholden to them, because this is where Uranus comes in. So whether it is romantically or around your associations, we all have to have a sense of freedom, and that's when the best relationships thrive of all different kinds. But if there is somebody in your world at the present time who does want or seem to want to have a little bit more of a say in what you do, what your interests are, how you dress, who you've chosen to go out with, that kind of stuff could really stick in your craw. And because Uranus is in 8, that possessiveness and control that could come up is something that you're going to resist in quite a major way. But if you do want to bring a greater spark of interaction to your world, this full moon in a way is saying to you, look, try to find the opportunities to make that happen, because there is a great chance for you to use your authority with Mars in the sign of Cancer to drive forwards your interests and connections to others very constructively, just as long as there's no strings attached. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Scorpio, this full moon for you is really fascinating because the collective in the sign of Aquarius, but most of all your modern ruler Pluto, are making you much more conscious, I feel, and will do so over many years, of your feelings, but particularly in relation to where you live, how you live there and with whom, but also your inner world. You may find yourself becoming much more interested in personal development, understanding how you tick and how others tick too. But if there is a situation in your life at the present time where you don't feel quite as content, the moon in the 10th house makes it much more difficult to disguise our feelings, because the moon in the 10th is very close to the surface. But then again, we have another strand of complexity, that you can be actually very private, even though you can be very to the point in terms of saying how you feel to people or making observations about others. But your own inner world, sometimes you do like to keep somewhat of a shield. And this is where Uranus comes in, because Uranus in your sector of relationship has really brought a completely different vibe over the last few years. There may have been some incredible quick connections. You may have met people in such a speedy way, and it's been very exciting, but not necessarily very lasting. Then again, in an existing relationship, you may have just needed more physical space, not necessarily be apart, just do your own thing more. Then again, there may have been a desire to have completely the opposite and spend more time in closer proximity. It just depends on each person's unique situation. Uranus is a very unpredictable energy, but whether it is about home, family, emotional relationships, or the input of someone into those situations, perhaps a parent, perhaps an older friend, perhaps a colleague, perhaps it's your own judgment on your situation, somehow or another, conversations could happen very quickly over the next couple of weeks, very directly. And sometimes, because you can be so upfront and to the point with others, you may find that that comes back to you over this next 2 weeks. It doesn't mean to say that the other person has ill intent. It's just that someone could surprise you by being right to the point, but also getting to the nub of the matter in a very perceptive way. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Sagittarius, over the next couple of weeks, I feel with this full moon, you could have an awful lot of energy. If you're someone who loves to move around, you're physically active, you know, whether it is going for a run, going on the bike, going for a swim, whatever is your particular passion, that's something you could embrace in a big way this next 2 weeks. The downside, in a way, is if you try to do too much. The reason for that, and even in terms of being virtuous with work, is Uranus. Uranus is in the part of your scope to do with your physical well-being, but Uranus in the 6th house is a naturally quite highly strung energy. The 3rd house is about our nervous system. The 9th house is where we don't want to be constrained or contained. A very Sagittarius energy. So where the moon is giving you a passion to break out and be more experimental, be more freedom loving. But I think what Uranus, particularly applied back to Mercury and the Sun, are saying, well, there may be some obligations that you do have to attend to first. But I wouldn't be too virtuous, because then that just piles on a load more pressure on yourself, and that then can create a load more resentment if you don't have that natural space and room for manoeuvre, which is so important for a Sagittarius to feel happy and content. So if you have extra physical and nervous energy over the next couple of weeks, the key is to set some priorities that are important to you, and don't give yourself too much to get through. Make sure they are the key things, and just pick them off one by one. If you end up at the end of that process having some free space, then you can decide again to do something different. But if you are in a job or a life structure which just feels far too limiting, what your thoughts and actions at the moment need to be about is creating a little bit more space and room to be spontaneous. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Capricorn, the 8th house position of the full moon is about where we're most invested. It can be about long-term financial planning, so things like insurances, pensions, savings, anything to do with the vehicle that looks out for our future. The 2nd house is about our immediate financial expenditure, going to the shops, buying the food. The 5th house, where Uranus is it's the maverick planet, and my word, that's a maverick position for Uranus to be in, because it is in a sister Earth sign. The 5th house can be fun, and since Uranus has been there, you may have done some things in a very random way that actually have brought a great deal of pleasure. But if you're dealing with a situation at the moment where you feel that someone's being a bit controlling or possessive with resources, or not very understanding of some of the realities of the cost of living, so for example, it could be someone you share your home with that doesn't tend to turn the lights off, is a little bit careless with the temperature on the central heating, these kind of things, and you're a little bit more on top of the detail, that's something that could cause an issue. But another thing that could happen with this full moon and Uranus is that either you or someone close to you may decide to do something suddenly based on a whim. But that whim may be to satisfy some kind of need. Now, it may be a flutter. Now, flutters can pay off. Some people do win. There's nothing necessarily wrong with a flutter. But if it's someone who does a lot of fluttering without a lot of considering what the ramifications are, that can be an issue. But seriously, you could get the desire to splash out on something very spontaneously. And if you feel you deserve it and you can afford it, why not? So some kind of quick purchase could be in the works. It may be a big ticket item, particularly with Leo liking a bit of grand, and it may be more expensive, or it could be just something that it could be more frivolous, and you may think, why not? So those are some of the themes that I feel will come up for you over the next 2 weeks, Capricorn. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Aquarius, sometimes in life we have to be really single-minded if we want to achieve something that's truly important to us. Pluto brings a much more powerful dimension to your situation now, and also with Mercury so close to the Sun on this particular event, but angled by your modern ruler of Uranus. If someone does in some ways speak out against what you're very invested in at the present time, they may actually get quite the reaction from you, because as much as the moon in your 7th house does give you the opportunity to be very diplomatic, if you are diplomatic but also explain why you're taking the steps you are, which may be for other people's benefits as well as your own, and someone still doesn't get it, I think part of what it can create, that square between Uranus, the Sun and Mercury, is in some ways a desire to distance yourself from whatever discourse or negative energy you may feel that you're on the end of. But it is true, if you read about Olympians or people who've really achieved a golden prize in life, they have made a lot of sacrifices. So if you are on some kind of road to a destination which is hugely important to you, it may be that Uranus is just saying, look, there could be someone close to you who might need a bit more information or a little bit more context of what you're doing to make them feel part of what's important to you. But then again, it may be that you're dealing with people that in some ways are, as it seems to you, excluding you from a plan, which can make you feel uncomfortable and left out. Either way, there is going to be some important conversations, I feel, over the next 2 weeks. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. It'd be great to have your company, and you can also get your half-price horoscope reports through to the end of February. Please see the link below for more. So Pisces, the 6th house full moon in Leo is very much about life routines, our structures, our patterns. It can be where we're very conscientious, it can be where we're thoughtful in a practical way to support other people, but the position of Pluto, the Sun and Mercury in house 12 can have some complexities, not least that Uranus is intersecting the position of the Sun, Mercury and also the Moon, because Mercury in the 12th house can be where we feel a little more vulnerable about our thoughts and our emotions. It can also be where we may experience a situation where someone doesn't tell us how they feel about us, but energetically we know that they're not really for us. So it can be secrets. The 6th house can be where someone may manifest some perfectionism, or be a bit too focused on what you're not getting quite right as they see it. Will they express it openly? Possibly, but only because Uranus is in the mix. If Uranus wasn't in the mix, much greater chance of something being said behind one's back. But Uranus brings a very quick electric energy to bear. Maybe it's you who's observing someone else's lack of conscientiousness, not taking responsibility, and that could start to really eat into your peace of mind. So if you work somewhere where it is a little bit of a laden atmosphere, it's not one of those places where everyone's got one another's backs, it's one of those places where there is a degree of politics, that could be something that puts you on edge over the next 2 weeks. But Uranus can also give you the impulse to perhaps make the inquiries about finding another role that's better for you. But just know that Mercury is moving into your sign on the 14th, followed by the Sun on the 18th. Mars in the water sign of Cancer goes direct on the 24th, and there is a fabulous new moon in your sign on the 28th of the month, which does angle towards your traditional ruler. So there's lots of good stuff coming, but maybe if you have been feeling a bit burdened by a sub-optimum atmosphere, whether it's within yourself or what you're experiencing immediately around you, you are going to take a firm control of your situation, but there may be something you do need to get through over the next couple of weeks and burst the bubble and regain your sense of control and a firmer grip on your life direction, and that may mean cutting away from something which isn't really working for you, whether it is a job, a relationship, or making some clearer boundaries obvious to those who perhaps are taking you, I think, maybe a little bit for granted. Thank you so much for joining me for this full moon special. Remember, you can check out your deep dives for February 2025 by clicking on the link beneath this video. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com, and that you can get your half price combination personal horoscope reports through to the end of February when you go to that site. Thank you.